The call came on a Wednesday morning while I was debugging code in my cramped Seattle apartment. Uncle Edward was dead. Heart attack, the lawyer said, though his voice carried an odd hesitation that made me wonder if there was more to the story. I hadn't been back to the farm in 14 years, not since the day I left for college, promising myself that I would never return to those 45 acres of Kentucky soil that had swallowed up so many of my family. But here I was, 32 years old, driving my rental car down the long gravel road that led to my inheritance. The locals in town had given me the same looks I remembered from childhood, a mixture of pity and fear. Mrs. Brownwin at the general store had clutched her cross necklace when I told her where I was headed. "Your uncle was a good man," she had said, and then added in a whisper, "He knew how to keep things proper." The farm looked exactly as I remembered it. The two-story farmhouse, white paint peeling like dead skin, stood surrounded by fields that stretched to the dark tree line. The red barn loomed against the October sky, and the old scarecrow still stood sentinel in the cornfield, though the corn had long since been harvested. It was the gate that made me pause. The main gate, made of iron and wood with its familiar cedar post. Carved deep into the wood, darkened with age but still clearly readable, were the rules. Never harvest under a new moon, and keep iron horseshoes above every door. If you hear your name called from the woods, count to 10 before answering. Never follow the deer with white eyes. The root cellar door must remain locked between sunset and sunrise. My hands shook as I traced the carved letters. Uncle Edward had made me memorize these rules when I was 7 years old, right after my parents had died in the car accident and I came to live with them. He had never explained why they existed, only that breaking them was not a good idea. The house smelled of dust and old wood. Everything was as Edward had left it. Dishes in the sink, mail on the table, his reading glasses folded on top of a farming magazine. The horseshoes were all in place above the doorways, thick with rust but solidly nailed into the wall. In the living room, family photos covered the mantel. My parents on their wedding day, my grandfather standing proudly beside his tractor. Ancestors that I had never met staring out from portraits with eyes that seemed to follow me. While searching around the house, I stumbled upon Edward's notebook in his bedroom, leather-bound and pretty beat up. The first entry was dated 40 years ago when he had taken over the farm from my grandfather. I settled into his armchair as the sun began to set, reading by lamplight. October 15th, 1983. Daddy's gone. Found him in the north field this morning, just like he said I would. He prepared me well. The rules held last night, though something tested the root cellar door near dawn. The scratching lasted for hours. I've checked the lock twice. It holds. October 20th, 1983. The deer came again today. 3 of them this time, standing at the edge of the woods. Their eyes were white as milk and just watching. I did as Daddy taught me, looked away and went about my business. They were gone when I looked back, but their tracks led into the forest in a perfect line. No deer walks like that. My blood turned to ice. I remembered those deer from my childhood standing at the tree line, their white eyes reflecting light that wasn't even there. Edward had always steered me away from them, distracting me with chores or stories. The journal entries grew more disturbing as I read on. October 25th. Heard a humming outside the barn again. No one's there. 3rd night in a row. October 27th. I saw it in the cornfield. Tall, thin, wrong. bent at the middle like it had too many joints. It didn't move right. It didn't move at all until I blinked. November 7th. The animals were all facing the same direction this morning. East, dead silent. It was like they weren't even breathing. November 21st. I followed the trail back behind the barn. I found all the cats dead. Not torn up, just wrong. Every bone was broken like they had been twisted from the inside out. November 24th. Heard voices in the well behind the shed. Children's voices, laughing and then screaming. Then silence. The bucket came up wet. Smelled like rot. December 1st. Something's under the house. I hear it dragging itself across the beams at night. The dogs won't go near the porch. I saw handprints in the dust down there. Too many fingers. Too long. A sound made me jump up from the journal. My name carried on the wind. Thomas. It came from outside, from the direction of the woods. I stood, hard hammering, and I peered through the window. The tree line was a black wall against the darkening sky. Thomas, come home. The voice seemed familiar, but it was wrong, like a recording played at the wrong speed. It took me a moment to realize why it made my skin crawl. It sounded like my mom. I made sure to remember the rule. I counted to 10 before answering. I counted slowly too, forcing each number through dry lips. 1, 2, 3. The voice called again, more insistent. 4, 5, 6. It multiplied, coming from different directions now. 7, 8, 9. My mother, my father, Uncle Edward, all calling me. 10. I opened my mouth to answer, but the voices cut off abruptly, as if somebody had thrown a switch. The silence that followed was complete. No insects, no wind, nothing. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I drove to the county courthouse. The clerk, a middle-aged woman with silver hair, seemed surprised when I asked about property records for the farm. "Oh, not many folks ask about that place," she said, leading me to a dusty back room filled with filing cabinets. "Your uncle was the only Hartley that I met. Kept to himself mostly. But he'd come in every few years checking the same records that you're asking for." The papers told a dark story. The land had been in my family since 1842, when Josiah Hartley had claimed it. And since then, every generation of Hartleys had died on that land except for those who left young. My great-great-grandfather at 67, found in the barn with his hair turned white overnight. My great-grandfather at 54, discovered in the root cellar with claw marks on the inside of the door. My grandfather at 71, peacefully in the north field, as if he had simply laid down to rest. And now Edward, heart attack at 63, found by a delivery driver who had become concerned when he hadn't collected his mail in 3 days. "There's something else too," the clerk said, producing a manila envelope. "Your uncle left this, said to give it to any Hartley who came looking after he was gone." Inside was a single sheet of paper in Edward's careful handwriting. "The land chooses its keeper. If you're reading this, it's already begun to call to you. Something evil lurks on our farm, and the rules are there to keep it in its place. As long as the rules hold, it stays dormant. But as of recent, it's been growing restless. There's a reason that only one Hartley tends the land at a time. The land can only bind one keeper. Choose quickly, Stay and accept your duty, or run and never look back. But know this, once the land knows you, truly knows you, leaving becomes impossible. I spent the rest of the day in that dusty room, reading about disappearances in the area, failed harvests on neighboring farms while the Hartley land flourished, and other unexplained phenomena that the locals refused to touch on. One article from 1962 caught my attention. Local farm's root cellar sealed after worker disappears. The worker, a hired hand named William Garrett, had opened the cellar after sunset. They found him 3 days later in the middle of town, aged beyond recognition. He had lost the ability to form sentences, almost as if he was a toddler again. Garrett. I knew that name. Ruth Garrett, the old woman who lived on the neighboring property. Her son. I needed to talk to her. Ruth Garrett's house sat 3 miles from the Hartley farm, a small, neat cottage with a vegetable garden that put my uncles to shame. She answered the door before I could even knock, as if she had been expecting me. "You have that Hartley look," she said, studying my face. "Same eyes as your uncle. Same burden, too, I expect." She invited me in for tea, moving slowly but purposefully. Her living room was filled with the kind of knickknacks accumulated over a long life. But what caught my attention were the horseshoes. Not just on the doors, though, but on the walls. I shouldn't have to explain these to you. I think you're familiar enough with them. So, you knew my uncle well. Edward was a good man, lonely but good. He understood the weight of what he carried. She poured the tea with steady hands. He told me that you left for college, swore never to come back. Yet here you are. And the lawyer said it was a heart attack. Ruth's laugh was bitter. Hearts can attack for many reasons, Mr. Hartley. Sometimes the burden just gets too heavy to carry alone. What happened to your son? Her face darkened. Oh, Billy. He was always too curious. He worked harvest for your grandfather back in '62. One night, there was a new moon, darkest night of the year. Your grandfather warned him, told him not to work. But Billy thought it was just an old superstition. He harvested the potatoes by lantern light. She sipped her tea, gathering strength to continue. The screaming, it started around midnight. By the time that they found him in the field, he had aged 20 years in 3 hours. His hair was white as snow, his hands gnarled like an old man's. And the things that he said. She shuddered. At first, it was incomprehensible, kind of a babble, but then he said the most confusing and twisted things. He spoke of the darkness between the stars, of things sleeping on this land that had been here for centuries. The doctors called it a psychotic break, but I knew better. The land had shown him something that his mind couldn't accept. But he survived it all. Oh, if you can call it that. He's in the state hospital now. Has been for the last 60 years. He's still young in his mind. Still screaming about the roots that go down forever and the mouths that wait beneath. I set down my teacup, my hand shaking. Mrs. Garrett, what is really on that land? She was quiet for a long moment. Oh, your family knows more than mine, Mr. Hartley. But I'll tell you what my grandmother told me. And before the settlers came, the people that lived here before us, they avoided it. They said that something fell from the sky there long before memory, and it burrowed itself deep. The earth swallowed it, but it didn't die. It waited. When Josiah Hartley claimed that land, he made a bargain. He and his bloodline would tend the earth above it and keep it sleeping, and in return, the land would prosper. Is that where the rules come in? And that's what keeps everything in place. They are the chains that bind. Your family learned what appeased it and what kept it quiet. She leaned forward. But chains rust, and things slip through the cracks. What will you do when the rules aren't enough anymore? I didn't have an answer. When I returned to the farm, the sun was already low on the horizon. As I parked by the house, I noticed movement near the tree line. 3 deer stood at the edge of the woods, watching me. Their eyes were white as milk, just as the journal described. They stood perfectly still, not grazing, not moving, just watching. I forced myself to look away, to walk normally to the house. And when I glanced back, they were gone, but I could see their tracks in the soft earth. Ruth was right. They led into the forest in a perfect, unnaturally straight line. That night, I made sure that every horseshoe was secure and I double-checked that the root cellar door was locked. The padlock was ancient but solid, and I noticed that additional locks had been added to it over the years. Whatever was down there, my family had not taken any chances. I settled in to read more of Edward's journal. December 21st, 1995. Things always seem to act up during the winter solstice. Something about the longest night of the year just makes everything go crazy. I've reinforced the root cellar door with iron bands, and I said the old words that Daddy taught me. They're not in English, it's in some language that I don't know. But they work. God help me, they work. January 3rd, 1996. I found tracks in the snow this morning. Started at the root cellar door and circled the house 3 times before disappearing. Not animal tracks, not human either. The snow was melted around them, as if whatever made them burned too hot for this world. A sound interrupted my reading, a gentle creaking from somewhere in the house. I held my breath, listening. It came again, rhythmic and deliberate. The rocking chair in the spare bedroom, the one that had been my mother's when she was young. I grabbed a flashlight and made my way upstairs. The door to the spare room was ajar, though I was certain that I had closed it earlier. I pushed it open. The chair was rocking, slow and steady. But what made my blood freeze wasn't the movement. It was the muddy footprints leading from the window to the chair. Footprints that looked to be human, but they were wrong. The toes were extended too long, ending in points instead of curves. I checked the window. Locked. The horseshoe above it remained in place. That's when I noticed the footprints didn't lead back to the window. They just stopped at the chair. I backed out of the room and spent the night in the kitchen, every light in the house blazing, clutching a fireplace poker like a weapon against something that I couldn't name. When the morning came, it brought a decision. I couldn't leave, and I understood that now. The land had already begun to know me, just as Edward's letter had warned. But I could learn. I could understand what my family had really been doing here all these years. I started with the barn. If Edward had been feeding something in the woods, there would have to be evidence of it. The barn was exactly as I had remembered. Tools hung up in their proper places, hay bales stacked in the loft, the old tractor parked in its bay. But in the back corner, something stuck out to me. A ledger sat on a workbench documenting Edward's deliveries. October 1st, monthly check-in at the Split Oak. October 8th, walk the northern boundary and look for any damage. October 15th, offerings left at rock pile. October 22nd, root cellar seals checked and reinforced. October 29th, final harvest before new moon. The Split Oak. I knew that tree. A massive oak in the western woods that had been split by lightning but somehow continued to grow. Its trunk opened like a wound. As children, we had been forbidden to go near it. The walk to the Split Oak took 20 minutes. The forest was unnaturally quiet. The trees seemed to press in closer the deeper that I went, until I reached a small opening. The Split Oak dominated the space. It was even more massive than I had remembered it. Its split trunk created an opening large enough to walk through, the interior black with char from the long-ago lightning strike. Around its base, I could see that something was left there. Small bundles wrapped in cloth, some fresh, others weathered with age. I knelt to examine one. Inside was a photograph, a lock of hair, and what looked like a small bone. The photograph showed a young man I didn't recognize, but the date on the back was recent, just last month. There were dozens of these bundles, maybe hundreds, pressed into the earth around the tree's roots. A twig snapped behind me. I turned to see the white-eyed deer. Not 3 this time, but dozens. They emerged from between the trees surrounding the clearing, their milk-white eyes fixed on me. They stood on their hind legs. No, that wasn't right. They weren't standing, they were changing. Their bodies elongated, their front legs stretching into something like arms, and their faces. God, their faces were melting and reforming into something that was almost human, but fundamentally wrong. I wanted to run, but Edward's words echoed in my mind. Never show fear, never run. The land is always testing you. The creatures, I couldn't think of them as deer anymore. They watched but didn't cross into the clearing. When I finished my check, they shifted again, melting back into deer shape, and they disappeared into the forest as silently as they had come. I left my own offering at the tree. A photo of Edward from his wallet, a cutting of my own hair, and following some instinct I didn't understand, 3 drops of blood from a cut on my palm. The earth absorbed them greedily, and for a moment I could have sworn that I heard something vast shift beneath my feet. The next few days fell into a routine. I tended the farm during the daylight, and at night I barricaded myself in the house, listening to the sounds that went about the farm. The scratching from the root cellar grew louder each night too. On the 4th night, I broke a rule. It wasn't intentional. I had been checking the chicken coop, making sure the birds were secure for the night, when I realized that the sun had already set. The root cellar door was still locked, but I was outside after dark. I booked it back to the house. And that's when I saw it. The scarecrow from the cornfield was standing in my path. Not hung up on its post, but standing. Its burlap face turned toward me and something dark leaked from where its eyes should have been. "Thomas," it said in a voice like rustling corn husks. "The new keeper. The land tastes your blood and finds it acceptable." I couldn't move or couldn't breathe. The thing that wore the scarecrow's form tilted its head. "But you are incomplete. You are not prepared." "What are you?" I managed to get out. "A herald, a warning, a memory of the last time that somebody failed." It gestured to the root cellar with one straw-stuffed arm. Josiah Hartley knew what he sealed in there. His children forgot. They think they guard against something below, but they're wrong. They guard against something returning to below. I don't understand. Well, then you better learn, Keeper. Before the longest night of the year, or the fifth rule will no longer be enough. The scarecrow collapsed, just cloth and straw again. I ran to the house and didn't look back. Edward's journal became my Bible. I read about every incident, every close call, every time that the rules had been tested. But it was an entry from just last year that made everything click. November 30th, 2023. The Historical Society in town has been digitizing old documents. I found something that changes everything. Josiah didn't make a bargain to keep something sleeping. He made a bargain to keep something imprisoned. The thing below isn't from below. It fell from above, from the dark between stars. The people before saw it fall, saw it burrow deep to hide from the sun. But it wasn't dying. It was growing. The rules don't appease it. They maintain the prison that Josiah built. We're not farmers. We're wardens. And our prisoner has been testing the bars for almost 2 centuries now. I'm old, I'm tired, and I'm alone. Thomas is out there somewhere living his life free from this burden. Good. Let him stay free. I'll hold things down for as long as I can. But I won't be able to do it forever. And I fear what happens when there's no Hartley left to speak the words that bind. December 21st was coming, the longest day, the solstice. I had 2 weeks to prepare. 3 days before the solstice, I found a new rule carved into the gatepost. The wood was fresh and still bleeding sap, but I knew that I hadn't carved it. When the stars are right, one must go below. That night, the scratching from the root cellar had stopped. The silence was worse than the noise had ever been. December 21st came with a blizzard that shut down the county. The power went out at noon and no amount of fiddling could get the generator to start up. By nightfall, I was alone in the dark with only candles and the dying fire for light. At exactly midnight, somebody knocked on the door. "Thomas," my mother's voice called out. "Oh, it's so cold. Please let me in." I didn't answer. Rule 5. Never open the door between midnight and 3 a.m., no matter what voice it uses. The knocking came again, harder. "Thomas, please. I'm so cold and so hungry. It's been so long since I've seen you." The voice was perfect. Every inflection, every trace of her Tennessee accent exactly as I had remembered. But my mother had been dead for 18 years. "You're not my mother," I said. The knocking stopped, but then the laughter started up. A sound like breaking glass and tearing metal. "No," the thing outside agreed, its voice dropping into registers that hurt your ear. "But I knew her. I know all of them, Keeper. Every Hartley who's fed the earth with their blood and bone. They're part of me now, part of the prison that holds me. And you'll join them soon enough." The house shook. Pictures fell from the walls and I heard the sound of splintering wood from somewhere upstairs. The horseshoes began to glow cherry red. "You won't stop me forever, Keeper. The bargain was for 7 generations and you're the last. Come below. Learn the truth of your ancestors. Learn why the stars scream when they look upon this place." Every instinct told me to hide, to wait out the night like Edward had done for 40 years. But that 6th rule burned in my mind. When the stars are right, one must go below. I took the keys to the root cellar from their hiding place, lit a lantern with shaking hands, and stepped out into the blizzard. The white-eyed deer stood in a circle around the house, but they parted as I walked toward the root cellar. In their almost human faces, I saw something like pity. The cellar door's padlocks were already open, hanging loose on their chains. The iron bands that Edward had installed were twisted and broken. The door itself stood slightly ajar, darkness visible beyond. I descended. The root cellar was wrong. It should have been a small space, maybe 10 feet by 12, with stone walls and wooden shelves for storing vegetables. Instead, stairs led down far deeper than they should, carved from stone that looked older than the farm, older than the settlement of Kentucky, older than human memory. The walls were covered in markings made by human hands. I recognized Josiah's work from the style, but others seemed to have grown from the stone itself, pulsing with a faint glow that made my lantern unnecessary. I descended for what felt like hours, but it was probably minutes. Time moved strangely here. The scratching sound returned, but now I realized it wasn't scratching at all. It was breathing, the respiration of something vast and patient. The stairs ended in a chamber that couldn't possibly exist. The ceiling stretched up into the darkness, and the floor was covered in these similar markings that I had seen, all centered on a seal in the middle, a massive stone disc. The disc was cracked. Not just cracked, but shattered, held together only by the power of the words and will of generations of Hartleys. And at its center, something pulsed like a diseased heart. "Welcome, Final Keeper." The thing beneath the seal pressed against its prison, and I caught glimpses of it through the cracks. Not enough to comprehend, but just enough to understand why Billy Garrett had screamed about the dark between the stars. "Your ancestor was clever. When I fell, burning and wounded, I thought this world would be easy prey. But Josiah Hartley found me weak, still healing from my journey through the void. He bound me with words stolen from my own language, turned my own power against me. For 7 generations, your bloodline has been my chain. What are you?" "I am what comes before. I am what remains after. I am the hunger between galaxies, given form and purpose. Your kind calls us many names: star spawn, outer gods, the things that should not be. But names are just another kind of chain, and I have been chained long enough." The seal cracked further. Something that might have been a tentacle or might have been a tongue of dark fire pushed through. "The bargain ends tonight, Keeper. 7 generations have passed. The stars are right for my return. But I offer you a choice, as I offered Josiah, as I offered each keeper before you." "What choice?" "Serve me willingly. Speak the words that free rather than bind. Become my messenger in this world, and I will reward you with power beyond imagination. Or resist and join your bloodline in an eternal prison of flesh and soul, holding me until the stars burn out." I thought of Edward dying alone in this house, his heart finally giving out under the stress of 40 years doing it. I thought of my grandfather, laying down in the North Field when his time came, giving his life to reinforce the seal. I thought of every Hartley who had lived and died in this land, not as farmers, but as guards, wardens of humanity's safety. "I know what you are now," I said. "You're not a god, you're not a demon. You're just another parasite looking for a host. And my family has been the immune system keeping you out." The thing's laughter shook dust from the ceiling. Such small thoughts from such small minds. Very well, keeper. If you won't serve, you'll seal. The chamber flooded with darkness, not the absence of light, but a living dark that moved with purpose. It wrapped around me, pulled me toward the seal. I tried to resist, but how do you fight something that exists in more dimensions than you can even perceive? And that's when I remembered the words. Edward's practice words, the ones that made the horseshoes hum. I spoke them, butchering the pronunciation but pouring my will into each syllable. The darkness recoiled. I spoke them again stronger this time and felt something respond. Not just in the chamber but throughout the farm. Everything that I had prepared and worked towards, every drop of Hartley blood that had soaked into the soil over 7 generations awakened. You cannot, the thing howled. The bargain is complete. The 7th generation has come, and the 7th generation chooses to renew it, I said, understanding flooding through me. Not for 7 more generations, forever. As long as Hartley blood flows in any vein anywhere in this world, the seal holds. I pressed my hand to the cracked stone and spoke words that I didn't know I knew, words that came from the blood and bone of my ancestors. The seal blazed with light. Not holy light, nothing so simple as good versus evil. This was the light of will made manifest, of humanity's stubborn refusal to yield to the dark. The thing screamed, shattered stone, burst my eardrums, and sent me flying across the chamber. But when the sound faded and my vision cleared, the seal was whole again, stronger than before. And deep beneath it, something settled back into an unwilling slumber. I woke in my bed 3 days later. The blizzard had passed, leaving the farm covered in pristine snow. The root cellar door was locked again with new chains that I didn't remember installing. The horseshoes had cooled, though they now carried a faint warmth that hadn't been there before. The white-eyed deer were gone, and so was the scarecrow. I found only its post in the cornfield, with a new carving at its base. The vigil continues. Ruth Garrett came by on Christmas Eve, bringing a casserole and knowing eyes. The solstice passed, she said. It wasn't a question. It did. And you're still here. Where else would I go? I gestured to these snow-covered fields. This is my land. These are my responsibilities. She smiled. The first genuine smile that I had seen from her. Your uncle would be proud and relieved. He worried you'd choose the other path. What path? Well, the easy one. The one that ends with the world burning while you stand at the right hand of something that shouldn't exist. She patted my shoulder. But you're a Hartley. You choose the hard path, the lonely path, the right path. After she left, I returned to Edward's journal. There were blank pages at the end waiting to be filled in. I picked up his pen and I began to write. My name is Thomas Hartley. I'm the 7th generation and the first of the eternal vigil. The seal holds, the farm endures, and I understand now what my family has always known. We are not farmers of corn and cattle. We are farmers of reality itself, keeping the cosmic weeds from taking root in the garden of existence. And I'll be here until the day that I die. I set down the pen and I looked at my land, like really looked at it for the first time. Not with the eyes of a child who couldn't wait to escape or a man who had inherited an unwanted burden, but with the eyes of a guardian who had understood his purpose. Somewhere deep below, something that had traveled between the stars waited in chains of words and will. It would wait forever now because a Hartley stood watch. Because a Hartley would always stand watch. The sun set over the western fields, painting the snow blood red. I checked the locks, spoke the evening words, and prepared for another night of vigil. In the distance, something called my name. I counted to 10 before I answered. The vigil continues.